Why don't you start off with a little karaoke, Mark?
Yeah, that's
I got another one today, Governor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce's webinar this afternoon. We are looking forward to hearing from Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont, as well as the Commissioner of Department of Economic and Community Development, David Lehman, and Mayor Mark Ballin. We will begin in just one moment as we have a few more attendees hopping on the call.
What do you got?
And good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you and welcome to the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce's webinar this afternoon with the Governor of Connecticut, Ned Lamont, Commissioner David Lehman, and Mayor of the great city of Danbury, Mark Ballin. My name is PJ Prunty. I am the President and CEO of the Greater Danbury Chamber of Commerce, and it is my pleasure to serve as the moderator for our conversation this afternoon. I would like to first welcome to say a few words on behalf of the city of Danbury and introduce the Governor, Mayor Mark Ballin. And before I give you the mic, I wanted to say thank you on behalf of my 3-year-old who has been listening on continuous loop your karaoke version this morning of Old Town Road. That's his favorite song right now, so he got a kick out of that. And thanks for your support of the local food pantry, Mayor. Welcome.
Businesses that are open.
Well, thanks, PJ. It's my honor to be here. Obviously, it's my honor to be here with Commissioner Lehman and our Governor, Ned Lamont. This wasn't quite the way we had planned it. We were going to have the governor down, and he's always welcome in our great city. Unfortunately, COVID-19 had other ideas for us, but I think the governor has been incredibly gracious at giving us some time and giving our chamber some time to ask some questions and talk a little bit about what the future of Connecticut is going to look like. Quickly, I just have some Danbury numbers. Some of you have asked and emailed in. I just want to share them with you. As we sit here today, we have 1,366 Danbury residents who are COVID-19 positive. Those numbers have grown, but they haven't grown exponentially. So we have definitely been successful at slowing the curve, at flattening the curve, if you will. Yes, people are still getting infected. It's a pandemic. That's going to happen. But in general, people have been following the guidance put out by the governor and his team, and it is making a profound difference in managing the virus. Secondly, unfortunately, we've had 66 people pass away due to the virus. There's been some very high-profile people over the last 24 to 48 hours that have passed. So obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with them and their families and what they're going through right now. And we'll continue to work at it on the city level. We work hand in hand with the state of Connecticut. They've been phenomenal at doing everything from providing resources for our homeless shelter and working with us on how we're sheltering people to discussing what the economy, with this new economy that we'll all operate in, look like, and having that vision that we have to go forward. So it's just an honor to be able to work with the entire team there, really, top to bottom. And I want to congratulate Governor Lamont on that. With that, I'm going to flip it over to Governor Lamont. I know he's got some thoughts for us, and I know you all got a bunch of questions for us. So, Governor.
Thank you, Mark and PJ. If you have hard questions, ask David Lehman. That's why he's here. Mark, it was about 7 weeks ago, right, that we got together at Danbury Hospital with John Murphy. I think that was the very first infection, located here in the state of Connecticut. Somebody working there, maybe commuted up from New York. It reminded you and I that this is a regional pandemic. It, really got going in New York City. It's ramped up, and Fairfield County and Danbury, unfortunately, were right on the very front line. I think we're rounding the bend here in Fairfield County. There's been good capacity in our hospitals. We never overflowed the bathtub. Right now, the pandemic is moving upstate. Bridgeport's been hit pretty hard. New Haven, we've got things stabilized there and good capacity there. And Hartford's getting hit pretty hard. So this is not behind us by any means, but in terms of the fast exponential growth of the virus throughout the state as measured by infections, and in particular by hospitalizations, we are at the plateau. I think we handled the surge, our amazing healthcare community handled the surge pretty well. We're thinking a lot, David and I, about what comes next, how we slowly get this state reopened. A lot of that is obviously as regards surgical masks and protective gear, and a lot of that's regarding testing. And You hear a lot of governors complaining a lot. We're not getting as much from the strategic stockpile, not really anything from the federal government. And we're always trying to negotiate with our friends, the Chinese brokers, with some success, but mixed success and erratic success. So we're trying to take things into our own hands, Connecticut, and do what we can. And we've had more success there. I'll tell you, CVS, Larry Merlot, part of Aetna, we contacted him a few weeks ago, and he took the lead. He said, I'm going to make Connecticut one of the very first drive-through Abbott lab real-time testing centers. And we've done thousands of tests there. I'm afraid it's up in New Haven, but that's a way that we're getting the testing more broadly available. A few days ago, we got together with the head of Quest Diagnostics and Hartford Healthcare. And why Quest? They're the largest diagnostic testing company in the country. They've got access to the reagents. They've got access to the ability to read a lot of the swabs in a timely manner. And it just so happens the CEO grew up in Torrington. So play every angle you can. And he's making Connecticut a big priority, ramping up Hartford Hospital, 2,000 additional tests a day, very soon. So we're ramping up on the testing capacity, on the surgical mask, the N95. We're beginning to get more. People are making a lot more. Supply is beginning to get closer to demand, but it was tippy there for a while as we tried to move it around depending on what hospital had the greatest needs. We contacted Battelle, the surgical desanitizing company, and made a pitch to them through some mutual friends a couple of weeks ago. So only the 7th in the country was just set up, again in the greater New Haven area, where they're going to be able to cleanse about 80,000 surgical masks a day. So we're taking the lead on our own to do what we can to control our future. Obviously, there's a lot of financial risk to small businesses as well as the state of Connecticut. I hear that from all of my regional governors and my friends in business. I can tell you that Connecticut is in relatively better shape than most of our peers. We kept our rainy day fund intact. We also had additional cash reserves. So New York is looking at a $10 billion deficit, and Rhode Island and Massachusetts are doing short-term borrowing. We don't have to do that. We won't have to do that, at least through the end of this fiscal year, June 30, which buys us some time, gives us some flexibility. Hopefully we're on the backside of this by then, at least the start of the backside, and we'll start seeing our revenues coming back. From a state point of view, what hit our revenues hard is that in most recessions, your income tax goes down a lot, like happened in 08, 09. In this recession, this healthcare recession, our sales tax as well as our income taxes hit us hard. So if we're facing a $500 million deficit on June 30, 90% of that is related to loss of revenues. 10% of that is related to COVID expenses, which we get 75% reimbursed by the feds. New York gets 100%, so I've got to work on that. The date we have in mind right now is May 20th. And that's what we've got the Ingenuity, Dr. Ko, Reopen Connecticut team. They'll be presenting this afternoon at 4 o'clock on CTN and elsewhere as part of our briefing. We're going to have enough testing and enough PPE gear, we think, that we'll be able to start making some clear determinations about how we reopen the state of Connecticut. And it's going to be phased. I can't overpromise in terms of flicking the light switch and away we go. David will tell you that unlike most other states, we didn't close down as much. We kept 2/3 of our jobs going. That was obviously in essential businesses like healthcare. It was also in manufacturing and private manufacturing, since so much of that is part of the pipeline into major defense manufacturing. Retail, we made it available for a drop-off, and we're going to expand retail, I think, over the next few weeks if we can find ways to do that safely. And David can give you what our game plan is based upon the facts on the ground over the next few weeks to get more of our businesses up and operating. I'm going to have to hit the pause button. It'll be very frustrating to people. Bars, big rock concerts. Sorry, Mark, I know you want to do another singing debut, but that may be not at the front of the line just because you have a lot of people in crowded situations. So you can see sort of what our priorities are. It's not simply the essential industries, but those that we can open safely and make sure that we keep a cap on this pandemic. The CDC, Dr. Fauci, they're all warning us about a second surge, maybe not as big as the first, but still a surge. And we're going to do everything we can that we don't have that happen, that once we open, we can open consistently and open for real. And with that, PJ, we're happy to answer any questions we can.
Sure. I appreciate your comments, Governor, along with your leadership over these last several weeks navigating through this pandemic. I did want to give Commissioner Lamont an opportunity to say a few words. He actually has joined a couple of our calls over the past couple of weeks. And David, I thank you for taking time out of your schedule to join us. So welcome, and please inform us of some of the insights that's going on in DECD.
Sure thing. So PJ, Mayor, thank you very much for having me here. Actually, I was just thinking it's been 7 or 8 weeks now, but the last formal visit I did was actually at the summit in Danbury, the old Matrix Corporate Center. So I think of that very fondly, even though it feels like 2 years ago, not 2 months ago at this point in time. But hopefully we do this next time in person when we are at better times. But there's really a few things I wanted to mention before we went to Q&A. First and foremost, as we think about this, there are 3 phases here of the response. There's respond, there is reopen, which we'll talk about a bunch on this call, and then there's recovery, which I think is a longer and larger process for the economy. We right now, and I think the last time we were on together, PJ, with this group, we spent a lot of time talking about the response. The governor has been very proactive with executive orders, dealing with insurance, mortgages, property tax, grace periods for other items, in addition to some of the deferrals and forbearances and the capital programs that are out there at the state and the federal level. I think a lot of those executive orders have slowed down at this point in time. We certainly are taking requests for more executive orders on a regular basis, but I think that part of the response framework, a lot has been done, and certainly shoot any questions my way or any suggestions my way on that front. On the capital front, though, I think it is important and it's timely given the second part of the CARES Act, which we expect to be approved today and signed into law by President Trump today, which provides $370 billion more for small businesses. So the way that breaks down is there's $310 billion more for the Paycheck Protection Plan, or PPP. So this is round 2. 18,000 Connecticut businesses received PPP in round 1, totaling $4.2 billion. We're hopeful we'll see another $3.5, or even $4 billion in this second round. And importantly, small banks below 50 billion and below 10 billion and local lending institutions are also going to have the ability to make these loans in the second round. We realize it was a bit of a rocky start the first round, but this money is so critical when we think about the magnitude of it and the fact that it is a forgivable loan, not just debt and more debt. So we really want to make sure that folks are talking to their lenders, whether it's their local bank or a lot of the online options, to make sure they're in line for a PPP loan, because our belief is there could be upwards of $1 trillion of demand. And even with this second tranche, there's a little over 600 billion in total supply. So that is critically important. And then the EIDL, the emergency loans through SBA, which are not forgivable, there's another 60 billion between grants and loans that we expect to be put in place there. Those are also really critical. The governor we were the 3rd state actually out of 50 states to be in line for these loans. Our businesses have been able to benefit disproportionately versus other states because of how early Governor Lamont acted. We think this is still a very good product, and this can be done in addition to PPP. So you can get an EIDL loan and a paycheck protection loan. So we really want to make sure that we're taking advantage of this federal money as it comes in. DECD has a helpline, and the SBA also has helplines that can assist business on trying to access this. But the EIDL, just to state it, that is through the SBA directly. The PPP loans are through your local bank and some of these online lenders. The other thing I just want to talk about before we go to questions is the Reopen Connecticut. And the governor mentioned it, and I've seen a couple comments in the chat right now. You know, there is a considerable amount of time, and there'll be more details on this at 4 o'clock today, where we are spending with medical and health experts. There's a significant business portion of this committee and an education portion of this committee. We are very focused on how quickly can we get Connecticut back to work. We understand the frustration, we understand the economic devastation, but we really want to make sure that we're being smart about getting folks back to work. And I realize that this is, again, there's significant frustration there given what's happened, and we're at close to 20% unemployment in this state as well as many other states. But a lot of time and effort is going on in this. Myself, the governor, there's a team of around 20 or 30 folks. We've looped in a lot of businesses. And listen, we're pushing hard to get going as quickly as possible. So we can talk about some of the questions. I see some of them right now in the chat right now. But I want folks to really know that this is a considerable amount of effort is going into this, and we want to start folks back to work as quickly as possible.
David, thank you very much for that insight. You actually answered a lot of the questions around PPP and some of the stuff that's going on from the federal government. So I thank you for that. Governor, you touched upon some of the important initiatives you've been focusing on at the state level. I think it's worth revisiting and talking about the critical area of focus in order to first and foremost stabilize the health of our state, to then in turn open the state's economy. So what do you see as sort of the 2 or 3 really critical areas of focus right now with your administration?
When it comes to fiscal stability within state government itself, are you asking, PJ?
Well, more specific in terms of the virus and controlling the spread there, like currently where we're at.
I'd say a couple things. The social distancing has really worked. We got into it a little earlier than New York did because they were hit a week earlier than we were. That slowed the rate, that dampened the nature of the surge. New Haven has been very successful at reducing the rate of increase. Eastern Connecticut has not really been hit at this point. That's in part because they're a little bit more rural, but also people have maintained the discipline. So, PJ, what worries me a little bit is I've never sort of cheered for cold weather this time of the year, but to the degree to which keeps people a little more indoors, a little less likely to, go out and party, I think that's a good thing for us. Every week is going to make an enormous difference. The testing's important, and we're doing something called contract tracing as well, so that if somebody is found to be infected, they get a call. We ought to be working on this together, Mayor Boughton. They get a call, we find out who they've been in contact with. What do you mean in contact? That means within 5 feet for, say, 10 minutes or so over the course of the previous 5 or 6 days. We, in turn, will contact them, get them a test, see if they're okay. And that we found, looking at examples around the country, have made an enormous difference in slowing the rate of increase. And so far, it is beginning to work, but it's still too early to say.
Thank you, Governor, appreciate that. And actually, you mentioned something that question received about the contract tracing. I just saw yesterday that Governor Cuomo suggested that Connecticut and New Jersey work with one another. How important do you see the contract tracing to be able to assist the state to get back to work?
Anything we can do to reduce the rate of spread is obviously really important. You're seeing it pick up again in Singapore, pick up again in Hong Kong, even a little bit in Seattle. So you do not want that to happen. It's all anonymous. It's all secret. It's private. So I don't want anybody to feel this is intrusive. Somebody gives you a call, you don't have to necessarily answer. Somebody says you want to be on the new Apple, Google platform that helps track this. That's an opt-in. So people should have some confidence there. But obviously, the more people that do it, the faster we'll get this behind us, and the faster we'll get this economy going again.
Yeah, absolutely. David and Governor, I know you just both mentioned the Reopen Connecticut advisory group that's being spearheaded by our friends at Advanced CT. Now, realizing that they are currently in the process of collecting relevant information to assist with the plan and the strategy, but what can you speak to at this point in regard to the potential staggered or phased approach to opening Connecticut's economy, as you alluded to briefly in your comments?
Well, I mean, I'll start. As I suggested before, we kept about 2/3 of our economy open, And what we're really trying to do is focus on those manufacturing, large and small, make sure they get the fever thermometers, make sure they get the surgical masks, anything we can do to make sure they continue to power forward. And then David is going to be able to point out a whole piece of the economy we never closed down that can ramp up sooner right now with the necessary protection. And if I could just give David Lamont a little shout out. He's sort of modest. This $10 billion emergency loan program that first come, first serve. And Connecticut was first come thanks to David and his team. And we got a lot more than our fair share there. And there's going to be another $60 billion grant. So hang out with a guy with a magic touch.
I don't exactly know how to respond to that, but I'm gonna go back to the question for a second. The Reopen CT, and I mentioned this before, and I see some of the comments there. There is a lot of discussion, not just about contact tracing, about the apps that we're putting in place, about the testing, about the dashboard, if you will, and the metrics that we're going to look at to make sure that we have the virus in check. Because really what we're talking about when we talk about reopening the economy is further pushing that curve to the right, further slowing it down. And we're going to need to make sure that we have certainly the hospital capacity as we reopen the economy, but that also that we identify and quickly stop any hotspots when and if they pop up. Because it is very clear just the way the virus moves and the more data we get, as we start to open the economy, you are going to see cases increase. And we need to be very careful to monitor that in an appropriate way. But I do think a lot of what's under consideration right now is in phases. The governor has the May 20th date that's out there. But the goal is to start to reopen the economy in phases. And I think the way we're also going to think about it is there's going to be a risk metric that we're going to think about per industry and possibly per location. Right, the state does look very different. Fairfield County is not Windham or Litchfield, obviously, and I think we need to be mindful of all of this. But a big question is, as we open the economy, make sure that we can measure the spread of the virus, because we absolutely cannot let it get out of control per the governor's comments that you've seen in some of these other areas. So it's really critical that we have the ability to measure that when we open the economy, even if it is in stages and potentially regionally.
So regarding the advisory group, how can the chamber and the businesses and nonprofits in our area, how can we play a role? Now, obviously, New York is a border to the west. Many of our businesses either partner with or have offices in New York. What can we do to ensure, I guess, as cohesive as an opening as possible between the businesses within Connecticut and New York, bordering one another?
Want to start with that, David?
Yeah, I think, listen, sure. There is coordination is key. So, and we're, this part of the state in particular, Danbury, Fairfield County, making sure that we're coordinated with New York, given how easy it is to drive across the border for whether it's a haircut or a meal or work for that matter. And we realize that the economy does not really care about state lines. So I think we need to do this regionally. We need to do this carefully in coordination with New York. So with Governor Lamont's leadership, we signed up for this regional approach, and folks on the Reopen CT Council are going to be working very closely with their counterparts in New York to make sure that there are not inconsistencies, especially in this western and southwestern part of the state. So I think that's the kind of main message is we need to be coordinated here. We realize people travel. One example, PJ, we're actually looking at the data now. If you're in a certain county or a certain location, where are you working? And we're getting that data to understand the likelihood of someone going from Fairfield County up to Litchfield or to New London County for that matter, as we start to think about regional overlays within the state beyond the intrastate coordination that's going to happen.
Hey, PJ, I'll give you one other thought which would be helpful. Look, we're coming up with these executive orders. We're trying to figure out how does that toy store, how does that retail merchant on Main Street in Danbury, how can they get going? And right now, we said, hey, it's a drop ship. A lot of people are taking out to the car and the such. Help us think through with you about what should the next steps be. We both want to do it in a way that doesn't put employers or employees or customers at any risk. And, how should we set that up to go forward? Your local businesses, what it looks like better than we do. We'd love that input.
Sure, absolutely. Happy to assist with that. Commissioner, going back to some of your earlier comments, the initial bridge loan coming through the DECD was a success. I mean, it went from 25 to 50 million, my understanding, and went in a day and a half. Clearly, there was a great need. as there's more federal funding coming, as mentioned, voting today and hopefully into law by the end of the week, would the state look to do a similar program for those that may have missed out on the initial round of the bridge loan program through DECD?
That's a great question. So listen, I think, PJ, that it's very clearly this is a dynamic situation, right? We don't know exactly when it's going to be over, when the economy is going to be fully back up and running, when our employment rate is going to be a lot lower than 20%. So I think our view is everything's on the table here, especially as we get into the recovery phase beyond the reopen phase. We want to make sure our economy comes back quickly. So where we are with the bridge loan, we had roughly 300 million in demand for what was initially 25, but then 50 million in loans. We're going to be making allocations on those loans next week before April 30th. And then I think our view is after those loans are out, after we understand PPP2, the 310 million, and the second tranche of EIDL, let's make sure we understand where the need still is, what that need is. Is it more federal response, a third tranche, if you will? As I mentioned, I think there could be $1 trillion of demand, even assuming a 2-month stop on the PPP program. So I think you could still see a bigger federal response. But certainly from our perspective, we're open to doing more of it. We want to evaluate it. We're not looking to, we don't want to compete with the feds per se. Clearly, they have a bazooka here in terms of their ability to, spend significant amount of money. We want to make sure that we're getting our fair share, if not more of it, into the state of Connecticut.
I appreciate that. And then this next question comes from the hospitality and restaurant industry. We've been in constant contact with our businesses, as the governor was alluding to. The question I received from them is whether or not, if you're aware of any federal or state grants that are specific to the restaurant and the hospitality industry, seeing as though they were, hit pretty hard during this pandemic.
So I'm not aware of specific grants for those industries. They're both eligible for PPP as well as EIDL. For example, there was targeted airline industry support in the second tranche of the coronavirus bill. I think it's possible we see it in the future, but I have not heard any rumblings out of DC. I would just say, PJ, one thing on that just quickly too. The way we set up, and this will be formally announced at 4 o'clock today, the way the governor set up the Business Advisory Committee for Reopen Connecticut, there was a heavy focus on areas that were hit the hardest. So retail, lodging, restaurants, all represented, small business, minority business. We wanted to make sure that we focused on those that were shut down or partially shut down. So those groups are represented, and we understand the pain that is happening there because of how the economy is just not operating right now.
I was just going to add for those smaller companies, those restaurants, one thing they did do in this bill with the PPP, PJ, is orient it more towards those smaller businesses and community banks. Obviously, you saw Shake Shack gave the money back because they had a little more meat on the bones than probably a lot of those Main Street restaurants that had needed this to survive. I just one other thing on restaurants and bars. Peggy Egan, I'm just learning to read this. She said, "Hey, if Litchfield isn't that infected, why don't you open up there?" And I think our thinking about this is it depends on what the business is. But if the bars and restaurants are open in, say, Litchfield County and closed in Danbury, what we don't want to do is promote a lot of traffic back and forth between different regions of the state. That just takes the pandemic back and forth.
Thank you. Well, let's hop back to the virus itself. A question by Dan Bertram here in the chat. Is anything in development to allow or facilitate at-home COVID-19 antibody testing?
Yeah, they are working on that. We got some amazing Connecticut companies that are working on that. One of them is not based upon a pinprick. It's not based upon a nasal swab. It's based upon a spit. And this may be a way that people are able to self-test on a regular basis. Because, this is a virus that can come back. You get tested today, you may be infected tomorrow. And let's say that's still months away, but months away may be in time.
Commissioner, this next question I think might be sort of maybe more directed towards you in regard to unemployment insurance. I realize this might be more in the wheelhouse of the Department of Labor, but wondering if you might be able to offer some insight into whether or not the state would protect employers from increased unemployment insurance rates if the claims are related specifically to COVID-19 or state-required closings.
So the governor actually put out an executive order on experience rating last week, which basically does hold employers harmless for the layoffs as a function of COVID. So we heard loud and clear there was a concern on that. I don't have the exact order, but that did go out last week. I can find it and follow up with you. If I'm understanding the question right.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate that. We can look into that as well. So one of our nonprofits in the area employs a lot of residents here. They have a question regarding the state's most vulnerable population, those with disabilities, including mental illness, traumatic brain injuries, and developmental disabilities. Is the state considering designated direct support workers, which these individuals are, as healthcare workers?
Governor, I'm happy to take this unless you want to. Yeah, so it's a great question, and we've started to get a lot of questions about this. So what we'd recommend is, I'm not sure what agency a lot of these folks are supporting, whether it's DSS or DDS. Obviously, DPH oversees much of this, but make those requests for your company if you're working with those agencies or regulated by those agencies. We understand there's implications for whether it's PPE priority, testing priority, and even beyond that. But those requests should go to the agency that you're working most closely with or regulated by.
I appreciate that. It looks we just got a question from Bill McCann. Governor, I know you've been working a lot with the regional governors. What is New York's open date, tentative that they have on the calendar? Is it similar to Connecticut around the May 20th timeframe, or are they looking at?
No, they're on the same time frame as us. I think we had said May 20th, no schools opening before then. Cuomo had said May 15th. They're doing their testing. They just did a lot of antibody testing just in the last few days, found that about 15% of folks came back infected in New York City. So we're tracking each other very carefully. We closed down restaurants and bars sort of simultaneously, so nobody would be driving from New York to Danbury and back. And we'll probably try and open some of these things on the same path.
Go ahead,
PJ, if I could just address that. I think what both the commissioner and the governor are saying, and they're on point here, is that the worst thing we can do, and they're taking all of their information from the data being provided to them by the medical experts and all those folks out there that are looking out for everybody's health, safety, and welfare. The worst thing we can do is backtrack on this. By doing a limited opening of Litchfield County versus Fairfield County, you're just asking for trouble until we've got our arms around testing kits, the right information that we need, and the data we need to make strategic decisions. The governors mapped that out, and they'll be working on that from now till May 20th. They don't wait till May 20th to start looking at these trends. They'll be doing this from now till May 20th. But it is going to be a very slow, and you could characterize it a painful rollout, but it has to be that way because a second wave could be worse or will do even more economic damage to all of us. So I know from my end, I definitely sense your frustration. I know the governor does. We've talked about it dozens of times, but he's got to do what's right for our health, safety, and welfare before we can look at businesses and how best to get them rolling. And there very well could be businesses that could open right away that will have very little impact, and the commissioner will be working on that. So just want to throw in my 2 cents because I get that question a lot.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that.
Sorry, PJ, can I just jump in for 1 sec? Just a couple things. I just posted it 7W as in William on the experience rating executive order. I posted it in the relevant information in the chat. Whoever had the question about unemployment insurance experience rating. I do think, just to underscore what the mayor said, it's going to be crawl, walk, run, if you will, in terms of the reopening. I think it does need to be that way, and I think that's the right thing for the economy, candidly, if you look at the numbers as well. We understand the frustration, but we want to make sure we get this right, and we don't create an outbreak where we need to have an even harsher lockdown in the future. As the governor mentioned, if you look at what we as a state allowed to remain open, all manufacturing, all construction, retail, given non-essential retail the ability to do delivery or curbside, we tried to be as flexible and as lenient as appropriate for our businesses. So we're very mindful of kind of the business environment. There have been a couple questions I just want to address on summer camps and school-related. So there is a separate work stream, part of Reopen CT, just focused on education, including camps, including childcare, because we understand that's important in terms of getting folks back to work, making sure they have childcare or a place for their child to go so they can work. So you should expect more on that, but that same ranking and potentially regional overlay is happening for summer camps, childcare, and the like, as we were talking about the same thing concurrently on the business side.
Excellent. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. So, Governor, I'll pose the final question to you, and you can wrap up our conversation for this afternoon. Since you've taken office, one of the most consistent messages that I have seen you focus on is positivity. And I consider myself a glass half full kind of guy, sometimes to a fault, admittedly. But I see us needing to take a positive outlook now more so than ever. And the conversations that I've been having with my the chairman of the board of the chamber, Anthony Rizzo Jr., and we've been talking about how we believe the businesses and the nonprofits in the greater Danbury area will become stronger, in certain respects, having gone through these challenges. So my question to you is, how do you see us collectively as a state becoming stronger, having gone through this pandemic together?
Yeah, PJ, let me, I think a lot about that. I mean, every day I've got to have a message that tells people, take this seriously. Don't take your eye off the ball. As Mark Boughton says, if we did that and went back, and you had to close down a second time, that would just be a body blow to our confidence. We want to get this right. At the same time, we're talking about the reopened Connecticut to give people a sense of direction. And okay, it's going to be crawl, walk, run, as David says, but we are moving forward. We are going to reopen this state, and we're going to be stronger than before. I'll tell you a couple of things that I've learned. I can tell you the real estate phones in Fairfield County, I can't speak for Danbury in particular, are really beginning to ring. I think there's a lot of businesses that are realizing they don't have to be in New York City, that there are a lot of homeowners or residences that say, boy, this may not be the last pandemic we see. And maybe having a little backyard is a better option for me than being in downtown New York. So you may find that the reason for Connecticut has a new meaning, going forward. Obviously the last 10 years, all the young people wanted to be in a urban hot metropolitan center. So I think you may see some changes there over a period of time. And more broadly, I think in terms what America's learned in terms of the supply chain, you cannot outsource all of this to India and China. What I have learned in Connecticut, I want to make sure that we have as much control over our own destiny as we can. But I think Connecticut, if we do this right, and we've done it right so far, we've stayed pretty strict to our discipline. Business community has been getting hammered. We're doing everything we can to say we're going to get you open as quickly and safely as we possibly can. We're laying that out in some detail over the course of the next couple of weeks. We're going to be stronger for it.
Governor, Commissioner, Mayor, thank you very much for your time today, but also for your leadership at the state and local level. We greatly appreciate it. I think I speak on behalf of the businesses, the nonprofits, and really the community as a whole, that we really, really appreciate the time and energy that you're putting into this. I'd like to thank everyone for joining the call this afternoon. Please know that the Chamber of Commerce, we are here for the businesses and nonprofits in our area. I've got the Chamber office phone now forwarded to my cell phone, so you'll hear from me directly. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. I hope everyone has a great rest of the day. Please stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. Thank you.
PJ, bye, Mark.
Thanks, everyone.